I had a watch of the second episode as well, and they do a little bit of polo, which takes place in little mechanised carts.
Right.
And the episode is called Cart Before the Horse. I mean, it means nothing. Absolutely crap. Atlas doesn't get on with Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Yes.
They begin having a little bit of toing and froing.
That was the thing that I didn't like to say, because they clearly assigned Duggan as being a bit of a bad guy.
Yeah.
Production-wise. And he tried, and it's never really that convincing and stuff.
No, not at all.
Because he's nice. Because he's Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
It is, and they're trying to get a bit of drama, like they would from the young people.
Yeah.
But very quickly they realise this isn't kind of working. And so what it becomes is just this thing of, this episode culminates in them trying to make some dinner, right? And it starts with Pat
Patterson making his beef.
Yeah.
And so they go to the shop. Pat Patterson verbally assaults the person who's giving them some mince.
That's right.
Oh, you like handling meat, do you?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm sorry.
Pathetic, Pat. Jimmy Hart comes in and says, I don't really eat anything fancy. And what he decides he's going to have is a baked potato with beans. Not baked beans like we have. He just has dry butter beans on top of it. It's proper just nothing but carbs. Gene then says, holy balls. They spend, in this episode, 5 minutes not defrosting some hamburger meat, which they're supposed to do. And they keep on walking up to the microwave and everyone's looking at it. And someone will press a button a few times and go, there we go. And then they'll press another one and it goes, right? And
then doesn't Roddy Piper try and get a NutriBullet working?
Yes, that's so much of those 2 episodes is just watching men like your dad give up on making food. They have a fully stocked kitchen and they are singly incapable of making a meal. What's brilliant is Pat and Gene, when they sort of just go, I don't know how this works, they just go, we're going. They go to the garden and play cards, but they don't tell anyone they're not making dinner anymore. Everyone starts coming in going, I'm too hungry. It's just...
Pat Patterson spends hours making these shitty lettuce monstrosities.
He does.
And then he's so tired, Tony Atlas has to stretch out his hamstrings. And there's a lingering shot of Tony Atlas with Pat Patterson's besocked feet. And you're like, this is dripping with meaning and imagery.
Once they can't cook some frozen meat, right, Piper and Duggan go out into the front garden with the idea of ordering from a restaurant. And the first thing they do is they Google the phrase American food. Duggan can't get a signal. They're walking around the front garden. People are in the back just going, I'm hungry. They talk about driving somewhere and they go, but we don't know where it is. And then they just come back in. It's Piper starts saying, hungry.
I think they make it, would just make it like meat paste on little muffins.
They just panic about not being able to make their dinner.
What's their whole life like?
It's so sad.
So, like, what do legends eat for dinner? What's that noise?
Gary Busey turns up.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Why does Gary Busey turn up?
To give some kind of motivational speech.
Some kind of calm down, bit of yoga, bit of this, bit of that.
And they all take it personally. They don't like him. They're really aggressive.
They don't know who he is.
Oh,
they don't know who he is. He has to explain the film he was in with Mel Gibson that launched his career. And when Gary Busey arrives, inexplicably, they just somebody bongs a gong, basically. And Tony Atlas says this.
I woke up this morning, I said, what, they had the dong show going on around here or something?
Just witless. It's like your dad and his mates, and they've given them a show.
Sometimes you may think it's boring. When I get bored, I honk at geese. Honk! That clears my boredom away.
It's documented Gary's had some personal problems.
Now, there's a great bit in episode 2. Jimmy Hart, they show him getting ready, and they've run out of things for them to do. So they just filmed Jimmy Hart doing his hair, right? And he's putting it all up, and he's talking about how it's not changed at all. And he says he's got a magic ingredient that he puts on it, and it's basically, I don't know, ink and glue or something, and he sprays it on. And there's a moment where he's got no top on, he's looking into the bathroom mirror, and he puts on his sunglasses, and he just goes, yeah. And it reminded me of that meme of Sicko nose at the window, going, yeah. He does that, exactly. He then goes into the kitchen and he starts having a chat with Tony Atlas. And Tony Atlas...
I love Tony Atlas. I had just never knew he was this thing.
In this bit, Tony Atlas tells a story, which isn't a joke, where he says his doctor has told him if his IQ was 1 point lower, he'd be a banana. And Jimmy Hart sort of goes, I don't think the doctor said that. And Tony Atlas goes, he did. He said if it was 1 point lower, I would be a banana.
What?
I went to one of these places that test your IQ. The doctor told me, Tony, I got good news for you. He said, if your IQ was 1 point less, you'd be a banana. That's what he told me.
Why is the doctor testing your IQ?
Why is the doctor saying if you were any stupider, you'd be a banana? Best thing about that is Jimmy Hart hears this and he responds with the line to the producers, spending 10 minutes with Tony is a wasted 10 minutes. It then cuts back to Atlas, who says, I'm like a laptop, very spontaneous.
And then when I look at all the great creator, the guy that created the internet. I'm not trying to blow my horn or something, but I'm like a laptop. I'm very spontaneous.
It's a
1 minute, he's talking like a college professor, and then the next minute is one flew over the cuckoo nest.
That's him talking about Gary Busey, who, like, professor.
1 minute, he's talking like a college professor.
Professor.
He is amazing, this Atlas.
Atlas is so good.
Burger King, McDonald's, and now with the internet, they put it on freaking Ric Flair got in an argument. My brain gone dead.
And Atlas is still in shape, and I think that's a big thing for him. You can see some of the others are body conscious, but Atlas is still really in shape. Yeah. In episode 5, they end up taking part in a Chippendales routine in Las Vegas. Fun for the show. If you'd have booked your hen party at that Chippendales show to get fucking Howard Finkel coming over to you, sort of like half dancing, I mean, you'd be frustrated. But Atlas comes out and he comes alive again. He's really, I'm performing, I'm still, big.
Yeah.
Duggan is great in that. Their dad bods are beautiful. And that's a moment where it starts going a bit better for all of them. But Atlas without Atlas, this show has got very little going on because Atlas is so funny throughout the whole thing.
I'm alone again. Tony Atlas is alone again.
Hillbilly Jim's come out of this well as well because he seems relatively normal.
Yes.
In the same way that Duggan does. Duggan is a really nice, gentle, kind guy in this. What you slightly get the impression of is Roddy Piper was at a much higher level than everybody else.
And that it's quite a lonely life, I think, where you don't you don't hang out with many people.
He sees those guys and everything, but he's never looked up to them. He was at the top of the mountain. And now he goes, and here I am stuck in this place with fucking Tony Atlas and Hillbilly Jim. And there is a sense of Piper is uncomfortable with being lumped together with all these other guys.
Right. Yeah,
and it's just a strange one. In episode 8, they do a comedy roast of Roddy Piper. It's notable there, of course, they do Piper. Piper is still, if you like, the main event. The roasts, I've said it before on the show, the single worst thing that America has ever introduced to the world. And I think people in Afghanistan would agree with me on that. It's still the roast. And they bring in stand-ups Guy Torry, Dan Abdut, and Ben Glebe. Such American comedy writer sort of names. And they work with the wrestlers themselves. Roasts boil down to me to just going, I wouldn't say Roddy Piper was a fucking pig, but his address is the pigs, fucktown, Pigville, the fucking world. Woo! Now, if you don't think his mum's a pig, then have a look at this photo, which is of a pig, and I've written on it, Roddy Piper's mum.
Is a pig.
It's literally that. But there's some really sort of like off-note bits where they're really personal about the families of everyone else. And it goes, Tony Atlas's family was so poor that if he hadn't have been for the fact he was born a boy, he'd have had nothing to play with. And I kind of go, the thing I take out of that is his family were really poor. It's really... Howard Finkel's mother never breastfed him. She wanted to keep him as a friend. What? What? I don't know what any of this means. Really odd. There's the introduction they do to Howard Finkel. The stand-up says, here he is. Any woman who ever fucked him was just too lazy to masturbate. It's Howard. Howard talks in the next episode about all his life he's suffered from terrible bullying. And it's just, why are you going in much too hard on Howard Finkel? I mean,
you kind of forget that the whole kind of setup at the WWE and wrestling, they're all jocks, aren't they? They were all jocks, so your Finkels, like they were you had to be either sort of razor sharp like Mean Gene or just a good drinker.
Yeah.
But you sort of think that these wrestling characters, they're the respect of the wrestlers. They're going, well, when cheap gags there to be had, they would just fucking say it, wouldn't they?
And they talk very openly in the last episode about how much they've bullied Jimmy Hart and Howard Finkel because they're the weak ones.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a volte-face on Jimmy Hart, but not on Howard Finkel. You're right about that jocks thing as well. But the problem is, of course, is these are now retired men.
Yes.
And they aren't part of that, we're on the road, we're all just making money and having a laugh and, that's your role. They are now, to some degree, just old men.
Yeah.
And so when you start saying anyone you ever fucked in your life was just too lazy to have a fucking wank, it's Howard Finkel. You're just like, Jesus, he's going to die soon. You don't need to do this.
All right, this next guy, I mean, what can I say about him? Any woman who him was just too lazy to masturbate. Put your hands together for the Fink, Howard Finkel!